Hello, in Soccer We Trust family. We have a big show for you today. The host cities for the 2026 World Cup have been dropped. They are official. They could potentially change the lives of that city looking forward. Maybe that's a little bit too dramatic. I don't know. Hit like and subscribe and join us as we get after it. Yes. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Thomas Dooley's favorite podcast, In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Hollywood Heath Pearce. And we got some big news. All of the host cities for the 2026 World Cup in Canada, in Mexico, and the United States have been announced. I am buzzing right now because a city that is near and dear to my heart, I played there for 8 years with the Kansas City Wizards, now known as Sporting Kansas City, is getting some games. And that's a big one for me in particular. Hollywood Heath, your overall thoughts on... Actually, you know what? Let me do this. Let me do this really quick. I should name all the cities first, right? So in the West... we have Vancouver got selected from Canada. We got Seattle, San Francisco Bay Area. It's going to be held where the 49ers play in Santa Clara, which is just north of San Jose. Los Angeles, and Heath's going to get into us, they made sure to designate SoFi Stadium, and Guadalajara, okay? That is on the western side of things. In the middle, let's say central, we got Atlanta, Dallas, Houston gets in, Kansas City gets in, as I just mentioned, Mexico City, and Monterrey. So there's 3 Mexican cities. There's only going to be 2 Canadian cities. And then in the East, we have Boston, we have Miami, we have New York, we have Philly, we have Toronto. So the big ones that are being left out, Baltimore/DC, Cincinnati, Denver, Edmonton, Nashville, and Orlando did not make the cut. I just named a whole bunch of cities there for you. And if everybody can remember that at the end, I'll give you like a lollipop.
Well,
Heath, overall thoughts on this?
Jimmy, what was that number of teams selected? I don't have that in front of me.
So you have 2 from Canada. You have Vancouver and Toronto. You have 3 from Mexico. You have Guadalajara, 5. Mexico City, and Monterrey. And you have 11 from the U.S. Because Edmonton had to drop out for whatever reason, that allowed one more American city to come in there and get it. And I actually think it was probably Kansas City or Houston that benefited from that. So your overall thoughts on this? No big surprises on the biggest markets. Yeah. But I was actually kind of surprised that Denver's not in. And also the capital of our country, Baltimore/DC, can't get some love as a host country. That's kind of crazy too.
Yeah, there's a few things that I'm a little suspicious of. It was obviously when they did it, they were announcing all the cities as you just mentioned, and LA had SoFi Stadium on the name of it, and that to me was a little bit weird that all the other cities. And we were talking, and producer Alex was saying, well, maybe it's because it's a new city and there's multiple stadiums that you could play at. But I would think that there's maybe multiple stadiums in a few markets like San Francisco, right? Bay Area, you've got multiple stadiums. You've got multiple stadiums there as well. So something to me felt a little bit suspicious as to why they designated SoFi Stadium. And if that
because they wanted to distance it from the Rose Bowl, which has obviously been an iconic venue for the World Cup in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that, or maybe there is a second match that could be played there or something like that, or maybe the Rose Bowl could have a final or something. I don't know, with this iconic nature.
They didn't announce the final though, right?
They did not, at least not so far. I mean, the show is still going on right now.
The show is still going.
It's still
what's
going.
Crazy is that this whole thing could have been an email. It just could have been like a nice email out to everybody.
I just did another 1-hour show that could have been an email. What's your initial take, Jimmy? What's your initial take?
My initial take is I'm honestly a bit surprised that Denver didn't get in, that DC/Baltimore didn't get in. Those are big surprises. I'm not surprised that there's only one Florida city. So Orlando, which did host a game in the 1994 World Cup, not getting any games this time around. Miami is being the one that's selected. Atlanta's coming in hot. I think they're going to put on a good show. Kansas City. Did you see? I retweeted the reaction at the Power Light District in downtown Kansas City. Dude, that place was packed and people were losing their minds. I mean, it's going to mean so much to that particular city, and I'm sure to everybody. Seattle getting it. I think that's going to be a great market for it as well. It's Seattle and Vancouver very close to each other. So that's great. I'm actually buzzing because we've been talking about it and speculating about this for a long time. And now we have the cities that have been identified. And now these cities have 4 years to get their acts together. Not that they weren't going to. But SoFi in particular is a stadium that needs to be renovated in some capacity so they can host some of these games, because right now it's a little bit too narrow. No big surprises. I think the next big piece of this conversation, though, Heath, is who's going to host the final. And even the semifinals is intriguing to me as well. Any guesses on that? I know we've speculated before that it's probably LA, probably SoFi, but you could go to any covered stadium. You can go where Dallas is, where the Cowboys play, and you could play a game at any point because you control the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's interesting is if you think about capacity and size and atmosphere, you're talking about Houston could be an incredible place for big matches. I played an All-Star game there against Manchester United, and it was a rocking atmosphere. Atlanta,
What was
you
the
think
score of
about
that
the
one?
size. Well, I don't remember. I tried not to focus on the score that day and just really
It was
focus on
1-1 at one point. That's all I remember. It was 1-1 at one point.
I tried to focus on me that day, yeah, I mean, there's just when you think about stadiums, there's not a lot of altering you have to do in the U.S. The infrastructure is there. This is what the complaint has been: is why is it taking so long to get a World Cup since 1994? Because we have the infrastructure for all these things, and you have a place like Atlanta, which is like a travel hub for the world. You have other places that are cultural hubs that are tourist hubs, and so you have all these things. But I think Mexico City for sure will get a semifinal. I think if not a final, I think it would be hard to. I don't think the U.S. would go in on a co-bid if they weren't planning to have a final in the U.S. They strengthened their bid. I think Mexico's got 3 cities now, which is great. But I think being the leader of this, I'm assuming they want the final. But you're right; it's hard to say. It could be Dallas.
I'm going to jump in. I thought that when they agreed to do this and had the co-bid with Canada and Mexico, that they got all the knockout round games after the quarterfinals. So there could be round of 16 games in Mexico, but I think quarterfinals and on, it's all U.S. based. I could be mistaken there, but I can think that's. I remember hearing the finals for sure in the U.S. I think both semifinals will be in the U.S., but maybe a quarterfinals in Mexico. But I think that what's crazy too, we should bring this up. Vancouver actually dropped out. Remember when they dropped out, like, I don't know, 5-6 months ago? And then they went from dropping out to now being one of the 2 hosts, and probably will get 6 or 7 World Cup games, which is pretty funny. And I can't wait for the book to be written, or the big article that's being written behind the scenes about what happened and transpired there. Now, before we go any further, we have a Paramount Plus gift card winner to announce. Everybody, we're giving another one out today, so make sure you pay attention to what I'm about to say. First and foremost, though, congratulations to Alec Pitalis. You were selected at random, and our producer has DM'd you with the details on how to redeem your prize. Now, if you're a resident of the USA, today we're giving you a chance, as I just mentioned, to win another $100 gift card to Paramount Plus that grants you access to one of the biggest catalogs of live and on-demand content known to mankind. We're talking Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, Serie A, Scottish Premiership, NWSL, Brasileiro, the Argentine League, NFL, of course, movies, series, South Park, if you're into South Park, and who isn't. Reminder that this only applies to U.S. residents. To enter, make sure you follow at ISWT Pod on Twitter. That's the podcast's Twitter handle, and drop your Twitter handle along with P+ in the chat. And for those that aren't watching live, put it in the comment section, and our producer will pick out one lucky winner. We'll announce the winner later in the week. That is what's going to happen. All right. So we know all the cities. And were there any big surprises for you? Because I actually haven't heard from you, Heath, about which city you think is going to be the most gutted about not getting it. Is it Nashville? Is it Cincinnati? Is it Orlando? Is it Denver? Is it Baltimore, D.C., Edmonton? I mean, which city do you think is going to be the most gutted about not being selected?
Yeah, I certainly think D.C. for sure. I was surprised that Philly got it because I hadn't heard a strong report from Philly. But again, you play the card of Philly being the original capital of
there we go.
At one point. You can play the OG story of the history of the United States and that sort of thing. So I mean, when I think about it, it's just it makes you wish that you could have way more host cities, and obviously you don't, because you want to have hubs for people to go through or stay in and experience. But like, you think about Nashville. I think about Denver. I was there for the Nations League, and it was an incredibly awesome experience. Unbelievable stadium and atmosphere there. Obviously, it was US-Mexico, but again, a destination that people want to go to. But if you go down the list of, depending on whether you take it from like a competitive side or a fan side of where you want to travel, I think they did pretty well to get it right. Obviously, you have Orlando or Miami. Miami wins out on that one. It was going to be hard to be both and not make another major city upset in the context of that. And so, yeah, I'm having trouble really thinking of one that was really beaten out. Obviously, DC from a significance and the fact that, you know, capitals and the history there and the need to show off our capital in the way that you had with World Cups in the past is a little disappointing. But you know, there's a lot of great cities that will be hosting World Cup matches in 2026. Yeah,
it's going to be great. I'm already kind of starting to, I'm sure others are doing this as well, mapping out my plan to go which way I'm going to go. And obviously I want to see the dates, and this is where it gets a little tricky, because you usually have to buy tickets before you know who's going to play where.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you can't get tickets, being able to travel to some of those markets. And I went on Que Golazo yesterday to talk about kind of the 1994 World Cup experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't afford tickets. And I live about 15 minutes from the Rose Bowl. But I would go down to Old Town Pasadena, where everybody kind of congregated, because it was about a half a mile walk from the Rose Bowl. And after every game that was being played there, I would just go. I just wanted to see what it was about and the energy, and to be able to kind of absorb that culture. Not to say it was small, because I remember when Brazil won the World Cup, it was absolute chaos down there, and the streets were all blocked off, and they were losing their minds. And it moved me in a way where this game is bigger than any American sport that we have here, and it touches people in a way that doesn't seem to have the same type of effect on American sports.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really formative for me in particular, and something that it just kind of made me say I picked the right sport with my life. This is the sport that I love, and I'm going to continue to develop this passion for it. And obviously it turned into a career where I was a late bloomer. It wasn't really good until 28 or 29, according to Heath.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that even if you live in the city, and tickets are going to be insane to get, by the way, but there's still so much around the game itself, and how much the community can just be a part of something bigger than them. So they're part of the biggest tournament in the world. And to be able to have a little taste of that is very important, and good for the kids, man. The kids are going to see something that maybe they see on television, and maybe they get a taste of it somewhere else, but they're actually going to live it, even if they can't get tickets for the game. And I think that's really important for the growth of the game in this country.
Yeah. Look, Jimmy, you played in a World Cup. You went to 2014 with in Brazil as a fan, right? You were creating content and films and things like that, and you got to really immerse yourself in it. I went to 2018 and 2019 World Cups and got to immerse myself in the culture of that. And the one thing I took away is U.S. will be scrutinized for everything that they do, Mexico and Canada, in terms of what they're doing for the environment, what they're doing for at-risk communities, what they're doing to leave it better than they found it, because we've seen notoriously that hasn't been exactly played out in the way that Qatar's under the same scrutiny right now. Russia was the same, and then it goes on all the way back. But what I will say is, as a fan, and I was privileged enough, I understand that. I'm well aware I was privileged to be able to go as a fan to a World Cup and be able to get tickets and go to games and immerse myself for a long period of time for almost the entire thing. There is something really, really cool about bringing all these countries and people and cultures and differences together that the U.S., I wish, had in 2022, because it desperately needs a taste of what's going on everywhere else, a taste of new opinions, new thoughts, new minds coming in. We also need to sort of be held to a higher standard in terms of our behavior and what we're putting out to the world. And I think the 2026 World Cup is going to be an incredible opportunity to be able to do that across U.S., Canada, and Mexico, as well as bring those three countries with all of our differences closer together. And so when I look back at those experiences, like you said, and I'm kind of tapping into your story about being around the Rose Bowl and just hanging out in Old Town Pasadena, like, there's going to be a generation of kids, young adults that are going to experience this, and it's going to change their life and make them better people to do better things. And I think that's a wonderful tool if it's held to the standard that it needs to be held. And yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to say about that other than the fact that an experience for me, you and I played in the national team. You played in the World Cup. We had an incredible traveled, 50 plus countries around the world, but that in itself was a life-changing experience for me. And I think everybody deserves to experience that at some point in their life, whether they're in stadium, near a stadium, or just around this global festival.
I would say, yeah, I agree with all those sentiments, that if you don't live in one of those markets that got named today, make a plan to go. And I hope that you're listening to what we're saying, because you get to absorb these cultural things that you maybe only read about or you see about on TV or whatever it may be, and you get to live it. You get to immerse yourself into it. For me to be in the middle of like a big samba drum stuff at Old Town, it just changed.
Jimmy, I was at a fan park. I didn't both those World Cups. I never had a
crazy.
Single ticket for sure. I didn't have a ticket when I got there, but I find myself in the fan park to open up the World Cup. Russia beats Saudi Arabia by a number of goals. It brings the whole domestic country into life, because everybody wants the host to do well, because that makes everything more fun.
Right.
But you're in this fan fest without any tickets, and a lot of people there are just there without tickets. They've got their visas to come into the country, and they're just hanging out, and you find yourself amongst all kinds of people of all walks of life. And it was, again, I was 34 years old at the time, and it was just an experience where I was like, man, this is life-changing for me for sure. And I've kind of got the bug now of wanting to be able to continue to experience that, and hope that you can share that with other people.
100%. I had the chance to go to Euros, which is obviously is a big tournament, but I was in Warsaw when Poland took on Russia, and obviously there's plenty of narratives and historical narratives there that where the Polish have a lot to prove and have a big chip on their shoulder about kind of the big brother of Russia and over the overreach, let's say, of Russia. I won't get into the political details there, but there's animosity and there's a ton of tension. So to be in Warsaw, I couldn't go to the game. We couldn't get tickets for whatever reason, but to be there, to be in the fan zone in itself was an experience. And then I went to Ukraine and I was in Kiev when Ukraine was playing in the Euros to qualify for the knockout rounds. And they didn't get it. And it was a big disappointment, but just that feeling of togetherness, even in those moments, even though I can't speak the language of those people, that you're just there experiencing it with them was really something special. So it's going to be, I think, incredibly hard to get tickets. I can already imagine what it's going to be to get tickets for this. But it doesn't mean that should sour you on this experience of what it could mean, especially for a young person to make that happen. And I also want to say that if this is run well, and I'm sure they're going to probably name it beforehand, but there's a chance that the U.S. could also get the 2027 Women's World Cup and to have back-to-back summers of that type of event in our backyard for all of our kids to experience.
Then the Olympics.
It's incredible, man. I mean, we are priming our next generation of kids to be inspired in a way that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. Very similar to how we were inspired, Heath. They're like, this is something I want to be a part of. Anyway, we don't have to go into the nostalgia and romanticism of it, but it's a pretty big deal. And I'm getting goosebumps just talking about how it felt for me as a teenager experiencing the World Cup and being around different cultures and just the enthusiasm that they had for the game. Now, I guess my question to you and everybody listening, hit us up on ISWT Pod on Twitter if you want to join the conversation a little bit later. Happy to answer any questions that you have there. But also, if you follow us and hit P+ while you're there on Twitter, you have a chance to win a $100 P+ Paramount Plus gift card. And that would be pretty rad. You can do that now, too. You can drop your Twitter handle in the comments section, put P+ there. We're almost at 5,000 subscribers here on the channel, which is miraculous. So if you haven't hit subscribe, and I don't know why you haven't at this point, but if you haven't, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like so we can keep giving you the goods 3 times a week minimum. Sometimes we're doing 4 times a week this time because this is some big news here with the reaction to the host cities. So let's get our crystal balls out here, okay? And so what I want you to tell me, Heath Pearce, is I feel like when the 1994 World Cup hit our shores, there was a lot of like, oh, there's no professional league. Why are they getting it? Their national team hasn't very good. The women's team had just won the 1991 World Cup, so that was just getting started, and their great run that they're continuing to be on. But our infrastructure wasn't there yet. Now our infrastructure is much more mature, much more evolved. Obviously, still some growing pains as we work through the best course of action, how we continue to build out something on a professional level, and how the development matches the business side of things, and making sure that all kind of goes hand in hand so everybody wins. Not sure if that's all happening at the moment, but we're working towards it. But anything do you think that's going to come out of it? Because I feel like there was a big boost. MLS started in 96, a couple years after the 94 World Cup. What do you think we're going to see after this World Cup on the men's side of the game? Let's focus on that. Because we're partnering with Canada and Mexico in a meaningful way. Outside of the Leagues Cup, do you see anything maybe in your crystal ball there, Heath, that could be a fundamental change to how the game's being played in our 3 countries at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, the way the game's being played, there'll certainly be some differences. I think it'll be a transformative moment for soccer in North America. Now, you saw with Jonathan Osorio on the show talking about how the U.S. got 94, and it was a big change for us. Obviously, we launched the league on the back of 94, and you go from there. Where Canada's now getting a men's World Cup. They had the women's, but now they're getting a men's, and they think that could be this cultural shift that just changes the narrative. Obviously, hockey country, but now it's starting to shift. Younger players, much more involved in the sport. And I think that'll be a great thing come 2026 for Canada. Mexico being culturally so far ahead of the U.S. in terms of the endemic nature of the sport. But for the U.S., a lot of things will happen. We're seeing that in order for soccer to really be as big as we want it to be, you have to have a strong and stable domestic league. Now, MLS has mastered the art of in-stadium experiences, right? If you go to anybody, I was just in a restaurant yesterday and they handed back the credit card from our company. It says For Soccer Ventures on it. And they said, well, what's that? We started explaining a little because I'm a soccer fan. I just moved out here. And all I've heard is I got to go to an LAFC game. And that is a unique sort of thing that you used to hear about the Galaxy because they had big names and things like that. But now you're seeing that you go to any city that has an MLS team or a USL team in a lot of cases now, or even lower division where people are talking about unique atmospheres and community-based programs and things like that. Everybody's sort of finding their feet, and I think the what will come out of that is just this bigger and more mass adoption. We're seeing already Gen Z is sort of the first population that's ever seen majority affinity for the sport of soccer. It's the first generation that we've had that's in that place. And then you're seeing now this shift with the Apple TV deal that while MLS has mastered this in-stadium experience for the new generation of teams, the next phase is how do we go to digital? How do we get people switch from butts in the seats to eyeballs on the screen? And now you're going to see that lead into a 2026 World Cup that's going to bring all this attention of your national team, your Patriot fan, your people that back the red, white, and blue and want to support it, to now this World Fair. And then on the flips, once that ends, I think will be the new beginning of what will be a very bright future. I know this is very specific, but a very bright future for the game of soccer in North America across the board. And we will see exponential growth and sustained growth in a way that we're not seeing right now in terms of, we see these growth meters and metrics that happen, but holistically, I think it's going to explode. And I truly believe that.
Okay, we're going to take our first and only break, everybody. But when we return, we're going to break down more of what Heath just said, and also maybe a combined league between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico moving forward. I think there could be some energy behind it because there's a lot of journalists and influencers out there that's saying that maybe Liga MX isn't up to the level that it needs to be to be able to compete.
Influencers. We're taking influencers as
well, there's some people that I value their opinions in Mexico. And they've had some strong comments about kind of the levels of where the Mexican league needs to be and where it isn't. And if they want to compete, because it looks like we're trying to grow and we're doing things and we're moving players over to Europe to some pretty big clubs, and Mexico maybe isn't doing that at the same rate. So there's a big conversation about maybe they would benefit from merging with MLS in some capacity. We're going to talk about that and a little bit more when we return. Don't go anywhere.
Martin, the reunion. Action.
This one's for you, Tommy.
A reunion to remember.
This show was and still is big for the culture.
Martin the Reunion, now streaming on BET+.
Welcome back, everyone, to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Hollywood Heath Pearce. And we are diving in, of course, to all the host cities that have just been named. Congratulations if you live in one of those cities. Hopefully I can say congratulations after you get some tickets in a few years, whenever they're going to be dropped. We're still waiting to find out who's going to host the biggest of games, including the World Cup final, but that'll be a conversation for another time. Now,
Jimmy,
Heath,
Jimmy, I got to ask you a question before we go too far from the host cities. All right. Outside of the ones that your usual suspects for tourism, right? Let's say LA, Miami, New York. Where would you recommend somebody that's listening to this right now, whether they're domestic based or they are an international audience or crowd that's looking to say, okay, you know what? I kind of did that. I've done my Times Square thing. I've done my LA thing. Probably went up the Highway 1 to the Bay Area. What would you recommend? I got two cities or one city. Like, what's the one that is a sleeping giant? Is it Atlanta for you? Where's the one that you'd be like, make sure you got to get there for a game, whether that's MLS or whether that's for the World Cup, because it is a ways out.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm going to be super biased and say Kansas City first and foremost. I always felt like, when I got traded to Kansas City, I was at the San Jose Earthquakes, and in a very American sports type move, you can get traded without you really knowing what the hell is going on as a player, and that doesn't happen anywhere else with regard to this game. So we got traded to Kansas City, and my mom was crying. My wife was crying. Like, nobody knew where Kansas City was, what it was about. And so just imagine that vibe in my household with my loved ones. And like, I don't know. I don't even know how to answer this for you. But after 8 years of playing there, it is an absolute hidden gem in the middle of the country. It has an incredible culture and food and music scene. And the passion of the supporters is really something special. And I think that's been proven to be true with the sporting park that's been opened with Sporting Kansas City, taking that next step and getting out of Arrowhead, where I played, where the Chiefs play, and getting into a proper stadium where they'll
have the World Cup, by the way, right?
Arrowhead. Well, Arrowhead's going to be the World Cup. Yeah. So they're going to have, where the Chiefs play is where Arrowhead's going to play. I will say, when I played at Arrowhead before the Chiefs started their season, I've never played on a better surface in my whole career. That field crew was chef's kiss. They were so good. And every time the field got a little bit ruined and the NFL coaches were blaming us, it was always because the big fatties, the 300-pound linemen, were on the sidelines, but their sidelines are tighter than ours. But they'd always blame us for making that an issue when I know. And everybody else, and the field crew knew that who were the real culprits there. But I think Kansas City is definitely one. Toronto's a real special city. If you haven't had a chance to go to Toronto, Vancouver's beautiful too. Any of the Mexican markets are going to be awesome. But if you're just talking U.S., Kansas City for sure. Houston's going to be hot. So, I mean, they're all going to be hot, I suppose. Atlanta is really surprising.
But Houston's indoor.
Houston's indoor.
Dallas
though,
is
but
indoor.
You're talking about, like, if you're going to go visit as a tourist, you still want to enjoy that process. It's not just the 90 minutes in the game or the 2 hours that you're there. There's something about Atlanta has actually really surprised me with their support of the game because of just how rabid it was right from the get-go and how it continues to maintain that even when the team isn't as good as it was coming out of the chute. But those are the ones that jump out at me. The other ones are all, I don't know, Boston, Miami, New York, Philly. Everybody kind of knows those ones. Even though I do really appreciate Houston, it's just going to be like the surface of the sun. Not to say that Kansas City won't be hot either, but I think everybody will just be more pleasantly surprised with what they find in Kansas City.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to be trying to get sort of West Coast games for sure. Seattle's a really unique one. Vancouver especially. That's one where I'm like, and I know that's not the U.S. like I said, but like that is a city where it's unbelievable. But we know that a lot of people that go to World Cups are looking for a party and a place to be, a beer garden and a good time. And so it's not as, I mean, you will have a large population of people that are doing the touristy things, and there's plenty of places to go, but you're gonna have to cover some ground. You know, I have a feeling that it's going to be hard to get an RV. It'll be hard to get just about anything in the U.S., which is going to make it so great to be able to see the vast differences of the West Coast to the Southwest to the Midwest to the mountain range to all these things. It's a real unique opportunity for people to come to the U.S. and experience something different. But yeah, you're right, man. There's going to be some hot places. I mean, Guadalajara also, Mexico City in the summer, Monterrey, Houston, Dallas. Very, very warm. Miami's not going to be in a World Cup year in the summer. Miami, how many daily storms?
How many covered stadiums are there going to be? You have Houston, you have Dallas, you have LA. Is that it?
Yeah. So Houston, Dallas, LA. Let's see here. Where else would that be?
I think that might be it.
Atlanta.
That's right.
Philadelphia's outside
Vancouver.
Toronto. Where do they? What's the Toronto field, by the way?
Toronto, they can't be playing at BMO. It's too small.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a great question. I don't even know where they're going to play in Toronto. Maybe somebody smarter than us can tell us on ISWT Pod on Twitter or here in the comments right now. So wait, we have Atlanta, Dallas, Houston are all covered. Toronto potentially, and that's it. Wow. Oh, and LA,
yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
That's 4.
Yeah, it's tell you that'll be a welcomed reprise when you are in Houston in the summertime. But it might be one of those places you go for 2 days. There's plenty of things to do, like it's the great outdoors.
So, you know what I meant to bring up, and then we'll get into the conversation about what I was saying before about a crystal ball. Do you feel like U.S. Soccer has been giving markets that they knew wouldn't get World Cup games, these World Cup qualifiers or Nations League games, because they kind of want to balance it out? Do you think there's any rumor or truth to that rumor?
There could be some truth to that. It could also have been an opportunity to prove their value. Having not get national team games to get a little bit of a spotlight to prove that they can pull things off or do things at a certain level. But who do we have on this list? So we've got Austin, Nashville, Denver, none of which got a bid. Where else has the U.S. played in some of these games? Cincinnati, Minneapolis. Yeah, I mean, certainly
Columbus.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. There's a whole bunch of cities that got other games and other competitions, but aren't actually on this World Cup selection. And I get, maybe not doing it always in New York or LA, but it's interesting to me that it just seems conspicuous. That's all I wanted to throw out.
And by the way, Carlos Martinez is saying it is BMO Field in Toronto, and they're expanding it to 45,000. Interesting.
That's cool. That'll be fun.
I mean, they continue to expand that, and that's a rocking atmosphere there.
Yeah. BMO Field is very cool, and it's a good location, and
Shout
That'll
out
be fun.
Inebriati. Shout out Inebriati.
Yes, and also
they're great.
I think it's the walk down there from. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not too far from downtown, and yeah, I think it's a nice location. Okay, good. That's good to know. Thank you for that, Carlos. So BMO Field will be holding it at 45,000. Still doesn't feel like enough, right? I feel like FIFA wants to have at least 60,000 or more, but maybe it makes exceptions for certain
that would
cities.
just mean a group stage, right? I think you wouldn't be able to have anything beyond that.
I think you're right,
at a
based on the
45,000.
thresholds that they put out there, right?
Yeah.
That'll be interesting to see. I'm actually really curious as to who's going to host what and when. All right, so let's just talk crystal ball one more time, just to put a button on that, and then we can let everybody go. Because we have another show tomorrow kicking off at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. We're going to get into more of the good stuff surrounding U.S. soccer, U.S. men's national team, and any fun news happening around the U.S. women. Okay, crystal ball, do you think there will ever be a merger between MLS and Mexican League? That's what I wanted to get to. And I know that's a bigger conversation, probably a podcast in itself, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that maybe being a possibility, given that there's so much conjecture out there right now and speculation and disappointment with kind of how the Mexican national team is playing right now and just Liga MX overall, because it looks like MLS is making moves and it feels like in some ways that the Mexican League is being a bit stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the merger or some sort of interleague play that is year-round is the only way to go, considering what Mexico brings to the table, what U.S. brings to the table, what the need is over this next 10-year contract with Apple and also Apollo Property Management Group is planning to invest for 20% of the league or 20% of future revenues, $1.25 billion into Liga MX, which is only going to happen, which they're only doing if they're hedging their bets on some sort of explosive growth. And I don't see that happening by just licensing or sub-licensing rights around the world. I think that's got to also come within your region and find other revenue sources. We've seen with FMF, the Mexican national team, play most of their games in the U.S. that are friendlies because of the revenue dollars around that. We see Soccer United Marketing representing FMF on those deals to bring in more brand partnerships and sponsorship revenue, more ticket sales, higher ticket sales.
So explain to everybody, in case they haven't seen it, but explain to everybody the League's Cup that's going to be starting in earnest in 2023 and what that does, because it's interesting. And then also, do you think they're trying to use that as kind of proof of concept that a merging of the two leagues in a tournament format could maybe be, laying the groundwork for a potential merger of the two leagues?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because you're going to start to see natural rivalries. I mean, we've seen that for a long time in CONCACAF Champions League, but Mexico has dominated that in winning that trophy. Obviously, it's a huge deal that Seattle won it. And that's been a long time coming, that the U.S. was going to win eventually. But now there is this thought of like, okay, it's not just a one-off good year from Seattle. Seattle's good every year. And now they've won CONCACAF Champions League. And other teams in MLS are becoming good every year and building more of this foundation to compete with these Liga MX clubs. And that leads to the League's Cup. And I think it's, if I understand correctly, do you know exactly how that works, Jimmy?
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
But,
so
beginning in 2023, the tournament will be expanded to include all clubs from MLS and Liga MX and will function as the regional cup for the North American
teams
zone.
Or 48 teams. Maybe
with American zone with CONCACAF for the top 3 teams qualifying for the CONCACAF Champions League. And that's a lot of teams. And both leagues are going to be stopped so they can participate in this competition, which I find to be quite interesting.
Yeah. And so you're already creating something that's not just like again, CONCACAF Champions League, you got to qualify and it's the few teams and then there's no overlook. And there was a few attempts in the past of interleague play outside of the Champions League. That was kind of like your Europa League style that we've had in the past in Major League Soccer with teams from CONCACAF. But this in itself is sort of what feels like an attempt to move away from CONCACAF, which includes a lot of other leagues and nations. I don't know, 39, 41 nations in CONCACAF, something like that. Right. And having it be more of like, rising tide lifts all ships. And that's going to happen between the most powerful clubs, which is all the MLS teams are in it. All the Liga MX teams are in it. And that's a big deal because it's no longer like a qualification and this like side thing. Everyone is in on this whole thing. And that's where the real opportunity lies.
Yeah, it's something that I find interesting because it's going to lead to kind of a March Madness type vibe. I think that's what they're shooting for. it's and not only that, but also to tap into the natural rivalry that exists between U.S. and Mexico and our clubs, whether it's the national team or our clubs. And I'm fascinated by it, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to be. But it's going to force MLS to take a month-long pause, and for the teams that get eliminated early, I guess that's a win because now you can rest for the second, to start the second half of the season. So I don't know how it's going to be. Obviously, that might have been something Apple TV was very interested in with regard to, did they get the rights for that? Does Leagues Cup fall into Apple TV's rights? I got to look that up. I don't even know, but that would be an intriguing piece of the puzzle for me if they didn't. So
that's a good question.
There.
Like,
we'll get into some detective
yeah.
work, and maybe we can answer that tomorrow on tomorrow's show. Again, we're going live 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. A little bit more in soccer we trust for you this week. 4 times this week, you lucky bastards. Here we go. All right, Heath. So let's close up the show today. This is obviously a reaction to all the host cities that we're going to be involved for the 2026 World Cup. Again, 2 in Canada. We have Vancouver and Toronto, 3 in Mexico, Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico City, and 11 instead of 10, as initially promised way back when. We have 11 American cities. The biggest ones not included for me were DC/Baltimore, Denver. Denver for me is still a bit of a surprise. I feel like maybe having a presence in that part of the country, it seems like Kansas City kind of squeezed them out, maybe had a better bid. So I'm kind of curious what the story is going to be once we get some of the fallout after a couple of weeks or months as this all plays out. Orlando's not in, Nashville, Cincinnati, Chicago's still not even putting in a bid. I thought was still surprising to me. But that's where we stand. And it was a pretty big deal today. And obviously it's going to change the fortunes of a couple cities out there, especially ones that maybe were on the cusp, on the precipice of being in.
I read also that people saying St. Louis got fleeced. Also.
Yeah. They weren't one of the final cities though, right? So maybe they got eliminated early in this whole process, but I think they still have something to prove. They're not in MLS yet. And even though they've been a hotbed of a market for many years, and their history in the game in this country is well documented, and how influential they've been, and how many players they provide for our national team over the generations has been incredible. But not to say they wouldn't have people come out and support, but maybe they just need a little more proof in the pudding when they get that MLS team, and maybe they'll get a big game in the future. I'm not too worried about St. Louis overall. So any final thoughts from you, Heath Pearce, about this big day?
No, I mean, now we know. That's the main thing, is like there's so much anticipation with all these things. Now we know. Now we can start plotting our course across North America. And I'm excited for it. I'm still wrapping my head around an increased team format. As a reminder for anybody that doesn't know, it will increase the amount of teams to 48 teams. And
3 groups of 16.
3 groups, more games than ever before. The 94 World Cup is still the most attended World Cup of all time. Now you add more teams into that and a way larger fan base. It's going to be crazy. Very hard to get a ticket, I'm assuming, but just a lot still to work through and figure out, but we got plenty of time to do it.
All right, and Matt's jumping in here. Appreciate you, Matt. He's our now in-house detective, saying Leagues Cup is included in the Apple deal. And that is great news for everybody that is excited about that deal. I'm excited about that deal. I think it was a risk worth taking for MLS. Now, I forgot about the format. It is expanding to 48 teams. For those that don't know, it's going to be 3 groups of 16. The top 2 teams advance into the round of 32, and then it's just knockout round games, baby, from there. So you still need to win 7 games, or at least get to the final. It's going to take you 7 games to be champions. And so that doesn't change. And that's kind of how FIFA justified adding or changing this format. It was still going to be the same amount of games for you to become a champion. And obviously we believe that the U.S. are going to be perfectly positioned to have a deep run, especially with this current group getting the experience from 2022 to use that to their advantage in 2026. Anyway, I'm going to end it with here by saying that I'm extremely excited that this is done. The speculation is over. We know the host cities. And now we can move forward and really start to identify who we think the best host for the World Cup final is going to be, and all the fun stuff that goes along with hosting a big World Cup in general, and then also the festivities at each particular city. I'm already trying to make plans on what.
Yeah, you know what I just realized, Jimmy? I'm moving out of the country for the month. I'm just going to rent out my place for as much money as possible.
I wonder how much Chuck's would go for with that rich mahogany.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm curious. He's got so many rooms. Chuck has so many rooms. We're missing Charlie Davies today.
Honestly, his might be a host. His might be like a host location for a team. Like you can put a team up in there.
That's how big his is. That's unbelievable. All right, we're going to call it a show. Make sure you join us tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, to catch us on any podcast platform of your choice at any time that you want. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, ISWT Pod, and hit P+. Drop a follow and be entered to win a $100 gift card. That would be pretty sweet for all of you. We'll announce the winner for tomorrow. You guys know what I'm trying to say. So on behalf of producer Des, producer Alex, Charlie, Chuck Wagon Davies, Hollywood Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad saying thank you for listening and watching In Soccer We Trust, and we will see you tomorrow. Later.